Think carefully about the last time someone attacked you, not with a fist, with words, with a dismissive tone, with a public challenge, a subtle insult, a deliberate provocation designed to make you stumble in front of others. Think about what happened inside you in that moment, the heat that rose in your chest, the flood of thoughts, the words that came out before you could stop them, or the words you held back with tremendous effort while your hands trembled. Now ask yourself this: who won that exchange? Most people believe the person who reacts the fastest in a conflict is the strongest, that defending yourself quickly proves you cannot be touched, that silence means weakness, that composure means you have nothing to say. They are wrong. And Machiavelli, the man who spent his entire intellectual life dissecting the architecture of power, knew exactly why they are wrong. The person who reacts fastest does not win. The person who reacts last wins. Or better yet, the person who does not react at all. What you are about to discover is not anger management. It is not mindfulness advice dressed in philosophical clothing. This is the psychological trap Machiavelli described in the courts of Renaissance Florence, a trap that, once you understand it, makes every future attack against you not a threat, but an opportunity, a mechanism for reversing power in real time, a weapon disguised as stillness. By the end of this, you will understand why the calmest person in every room holds invisible dominance, why your reaction is not a response, it is a surrender, and what it costs you every single time to lose it. But first, we have to look at what is actually happening when someone attacks you, because you have been misreading the situation your entire life. Every attack you have ever received was designed to do one thing: not to hurt you, to move you, to relocate you from a position of control into a position of reaction, because a person in reaction is predictable. A person in reaction is readable, and a person who is readable can be managed. Think about the provocations you have experienced, the colleague who undermines your work in front of others, the partner who escalates a minor disagreement into a full assault on your character, the stranger online who reduces your ideas to something contemptible, the person in a meeting who interrupts you, dismisses you, or speaks over you as though you do not exist. What do all of these have in common? They are invitations. Every single one of them is an invitation to abandon your position and step into theirs. When you raise your voice, you confirm that they found the wound. When you over-explain yourself, you signal that their judgment matters more than your certainty. When you withdraw into cold silence after an explosion, you reveal that the explosion happened and that they caused it. They have moved you, and movement in the game of power is concession. You were targeted not because you were weak. You were targeted because you were human, and humans are wired to react. The attack is a test of calibration, and no one ever taught you that failing the test means handing over something you may not recover. The most dangerous battles you have ever lost were not the ones where someone was stronger than you. They were the ones where someone was calmer than you, where they said something that destabilized you completely, and they watched without flinching as you dismantled yourself. Have you ever felt that? The unsettling clarity of realizing, hours after a confrontation, that you lost, not because you were wrong, but because you moved and they did not. That asymmetry, that is where power lives. And Machiavelli mapped it 500 years ago with surgical precision. Machiavelli observed that the greatest threat to a prince was not an external enemy with a larger army. The greatest threat was internal instability, the inability to govern the self when the world applied pressure. He wrote in The Prince that a ruler who cannot control his responses cannot control his kingdom, because the kingdom mirrors the man. And a man who can be moved by provocation is a man who can be steered by anyone willing to provoke him. This is not ancient history. This is your Tuesday morning. This is your last argument. This is every room where you walked out feeling smaller than when you walked in, not because someone overpowered you, but because someone found the lever and you let them pull it. The question is not whether you're strong enough to fight back. The question is whether you are disciplined enough not to. Think about the people in your life who seem to command rooms without demanding attention, who face criticism without collapsing or counterattacking, who absorb pressure and return silence. Have you noticed how unsettling it is to attack someone who does not react? How disorienting it becomes when you escalate and they remain perfectly still. There is a reason that stillness feels threatening. We'll get to that. But right now, ask yourself honestly, where have you been losing this battle? In which rooms? With which people? What patterns repeat? Write it in the comments. Your answer matters more than you think. What most people don't understand is that emotional reaction is not a character flaw. It is a design feature exploited by people who understand it. To truly grasp why you react the way you do, you need to understand the architecture of the attack itself. Neuroscience gives us one half of the answer. When you perceive a threat, social, emotional, or physical, the amygdala fires before the prefrontal cortex can intervene. You feel before you think, and in the window between stimulus and cognition, the reaction escapes. A raised voice, a defensive posture, a flood of words designed to protect a self that doesn't actually need protecting in that moment. By the time rational thought catches up, the damage is done. But Machiavelli gives us the other half, the half that is far more dangerous. Machiavelli understood that most men are slaves to fortuna, to external circumstances, because they have never trained the inner instrument. He admired men of virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, but in the original Latin sense, strength, force, the capacity to act with precision under pressure. And he observed that the majority of men abandon virtue the moment they are challenged personally, because the personal attack is the one that bypasses strategy and lands directly in the identity. This is the mechanism. The attack is not aimed at your argument, it is aimed at your self-image. And when something threatens the self-image, the ego does not strategize, it panics. It launches a defense, noise, aggression, withdrawal, over-explanation that announces to every person watching that you have been destabilized. The attacker does not need to win the argument, they only need to make you react. Because a reaction is a confession. It says, you found something, this matters to me, I can be moved here. Think about how many conflicts in your life were actually won by the person who remained calmest. Not the loudest, not the most articulate, not the most righteous, the calmest. Machiavelli studied this in the courts of Florence, environments where political survival depended on reading who could be broken and who could not. He noted that the most dangerous men were not those who threatened, they were those who absorbed threats without showing the impact. Because if you cannot tell where the wound is, you cannot press it. And if you cannot press it, you have no leverage. And without leverage, your attack becomes theater, loud, visible, and ultimately embarrassing. This is the trap that most people miss. When someone attacks you and you do not react, it is not you who becomes exposed, it is them. They have committed aggression. They have revealed the intention to destabilize you. And if you remain still, the room watches them fail. The aggression hangs in the air, unanswered, unabsorbed, returning to its origin. You have given them nothing to work with, and the silence that follows is not empty, it is devastating. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote that the most powerful human act is the refusal to react to a provocation one is fully capable of answering, not the inability to respond, the choice not to, because that choice demonstrates a sovereignty over the self that most people never achieve. And sovereignty, visible sovereignty, terrifies those who depend on reactivity to feel dominant. Have you begun to see the architecture? The attack is not the danger, your reaction to it is. And between those two things, the attack and the reaction, there's a space, a fraction of a second that contains everything. We are about to enter that space. If you have stayed this far, I want to say something directly. Most people who started this video are already gone. They clicked away when the idea became uncomfortable, when they realized this was not going to validate their anger or tell them how to fight back harder. They wanted ammunition, and what they found instead was a mirror. You are still here. That means something. What you are about to receive is not a set of clever comebacks. It is not a framework for winning arguments. It is a complete restructuring of how you understand conflict, power, and your own identity under pressure. And this, what comes next, is the part that changes the game permanently. Machiavelli's deepest strategic insight was not about armies or alliances. It was about circuits. Every act of aggression is a circuit seeking completion. The attacker sends current, provocation, insult, challenge, and they need the current to return. They need your reaction to complete the loop, to confirm their dominance, to charge the exchange with meaning. Without the return current, the circuit fails. The aggression collapses into itself. Your calm is not passivity. It is an open circuit that leaves the charge with them. Think about what actually happens when you don't react. The person who attacked you is now standing with their aggression fully visible, having received nothing in return. The escalation they planned for does not materialize. The defensive explosion they anticipated, the one they can use to paint you as unstable, emotional, irrational, never comes. They are exposed, their intent is visible, and they have no move. This is what Machiavelli called the reversal, not a counterattack, a reversal, where the act of aggression becomes the aggressor's liability, not yours. But here is the part that most people get wrong. Staying calm under attack is not the same as suppressing emotion. Suppression is internal noise contained, which still leaks, still shows, still gives the attacker information. The calm that reverses power is not performed, it is achieved through a specific architecture of internal positioning. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was born a slave and became one of the most psychologically sovereign men in recorded history, made a distinction that is essential here. He said, "Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Within our control is our response, nothing else. The attack is not within your control. The provocation is not within your control. What they say, what they do, what they believe about you, none of it belongs to you. The only thing that belongs to you is what you do with the space between their action and your response." Machiavelli operationalized this differently, not as philosophy, but as political survival. A prince, he wrote, must not show his wounds in public, not because the wounds don't exist, because showing them relocates power. The moment you reveal that something penetrated you, you have handed the other person a map of your interior, and maps can be used against you. So the first principle of the psychological trap is this: do not confirm the hit. Not with silence born from suppression, with silence born from the genuine recognition that their attack does not change anything true about you, that their opinion is data, not verdict, that their aggression is information about their internal state, not a reliable report on yours. Marcus Aurelius, writing privately in his Meditations, returned to this principle again and again. A man who ruled the Roman Empire and faced constant attempts at political destabilization. He wrote that when you feel the rising heat of anger, you are not responding to the present moment. You are responding to a story your mind constructed in the space of half a second. And that story is almost always wrong. It catastrophizes, it personalizes, it treats a tactical move as an existential threat. Machiavelli would agree, but for colder reasons. He would say you cannot think strategically when you are emotionally flooded, and you cannot win a political exchange if your opponent has already succeeded in flooding you before the real conversation begins. The second principle is read the attack before it lands. This sounds impossible, but it is a trainable skill. Most attacks follow predictable patterns. Public undermining, designed to reduce your status in front of witnesses. Personal character assault, designed to make you defend yourself, which implies the accusation is worth defending against. Tone escalation, designed to pull you into an emotional register where logic fails. Silence and withdrawal, designed to make you pursue, explain, apologize for things you didn't do. Once you can name the pattern, you can see it arriving, and what you can see, you can choose not to step into. The third principle is the one that transforms the trap from defense into offense. Control the tempo. Speed in an argument belongs to the person who is reacting. Slowness belongs to the person who is thinking. When you respond slower than expected, when you pause, when you take a breath that lasts a beat too long, when you let silence occupy the space where an explosion was anticipated, you change the chemistry of the room. You introduce uncertainty. You force the attacker to wait. And people who have committed to aggression cannot wait. Waiting exposes them. Waiting makes them overreach. The pause is not emptiness. The pause is power deliberately applied. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the art of the tempo in both military and political strategy, the ability to move when others expect stillness and stand still when others expect movement. In personal confrontation, this principle is absolute. The person who controls the rhythm of an exchange controls its outcome, and the rhythm is controlled not by the loudest voice, but by the most disciplined silence. Now we arrive at the final layer, the one that will change not just how you handle attacks, but who you become between them. Machiavelli identified two kinds of men: those whose power depends on circumstances remaining favorable, Fortuna's servants, and those whose power is internal, self-generated, circumstance-resistant, men of virtue. The difference between them is not intelligence, it is not even strength. It is the relationship they have with their own interior state under pressure. Fortuna's servants need the environment to cooperate. They are good at what they do when people respect them, when conditions are fair, when they are not being attacked. Remove those conditions and they collapse, because their identity is assembled from outside. It depends on what others reflect back to them. A man of virtue carries his position inside him. He does not need the room to agree with him to know what he knows. He does not need the attacker to stop attacking before he recovers his composure. The composure is not contingent on the attack ending. It exists independently of it. This is the final Machiavellian truth, and it is the most disorienting one for people who have spent their lives seeking external validation. You cannot be destabilized by someone you do not require anything from. The deepest reason you react to attacks is not neurology, it is need. The need for the other person's respect. The need for the witnesses to see your side. The need for the record to be corrected. The need for justice. These are not weaknesses, they are human, but they are also leashes. And as long as those leashes exist, the person who attacks you holds the other end. Machiavelli would say, remove the need, not through coldness, not through emotional armor, but through the radical internalization of your own worth. When you genuinely do not require someone's good opinion, when their attack can land and you can observe it with something close to curiosity rather than dread, you become, in the Machiavellian sense, unreachable. And what is unreachable cannot be conquered. Robert Greene, the modern interpreter of Machiavellian strategy, made this concrete in ways that translate directly to daily life. He observed that the most powerful social move available to any person is the ability to make others feel that their aggression has produced no effect, not to pretend, not to perform calm, but to have genuinely positioned yourself so far above the need for their validation that their attack lands on air. This positioning is the paradox Machiavelli left embedded in all his political philosophy. The calmer you are, the more threatening you become, not because you intimidate through force, because you become unreadable. You offer no feedback to the attack, no confession of the wound's location, no map of the interior. And what cannot be read cannot be steered. What cannot be steered cannot be conquered. The person who stands in the center of aggression and returns only stillness does not appear weak. They appear to be operating from a level that the attack cannot reach, and that is, to anyone watching, the most commanding thing a human being can project. The next attack is already coming. You do not know when or from whom. What you now know is that when it arrives, there is a space, a fraction of a moment between what they do and what you choose. Everything lives in that space. Your power, your image, your strategic position, all of it determined in a beat of silence that most people have never learned to inhabit. You do not have to react faster. You have to inhabit that space longer. You have to learn to live inside the pause without needing to fill it, without needing to defend, without needing to correct, without needing them to understand. The calmest person in the room always wins, not because calm is passive, but because calm is the evidence that you have nothing to lose from this exchange, that your identity does not depend on their approval, that their attack does not locate a wound, because you have already integrated the wound, that you are, in the truest Machiavellian sense, beyond their reach. Most people who hear this nod and forget. They will face the next provocation and react exactly as they always have, because understanding a principle is not the same as inhabiting it. Genuine change requires repetition in the dark, repeated choice when the heat rises and no one is watching, to hold the pause instead of break it. That is the real training, not the insight, the practice. The question I want to leave you with is not philosophical, it is personal. Think about the last confrontation where you lost your composure. What did it cost you in relationships, in reputation, in your own self-regard? Now imagine that exact scenario again, but you do not react. You pause. You let the silence work. You watch them overreach. What would have been different? Write your answer in the comments, not for me, for yourself, because the moment you articulate the cost, the principle stops being abstract and becomes something you actually carry forward. Machiavelli did not write The Prince to be kind. He wrote it to tell the truth about power, how it is lost, how it is held, and what the men who hold it understand that the men who lose it never do. The truth he would offer you today is this: the most fortified position a human being can occupy is not a throne. It is a composure that cannot be purchased, borrowed, or broken by anything the world sends against it. Sovereignty over the self, silence that does not apologize, stillness that is not emptiness, but precision. That is the trap, not the trap set for you, the trap you set for them simply by refusing to move. Subscribe if you haven't, and if this opened something in you, share it with one person who needs it, because the people who most need this are usually too proud to find it on their own.